Night clamps down like a lid. The ward gate shuts with a bar that feels like a sermon, and the alley exhales into the small stillness that comes when everyone pretends the dark is ordinary. You take your place by the mouth of the lane with a chalk stub, a tally slate, and a stack of wooden bowls that smell faintly of soap and onions. If you want to see how a street stays calm when the world would rather rattle it, stick with me and tap subscribe and ring the bell. We'll count the bowls, chalk the doors, and keep fear asleep. Your orders are plain in the way hard things look simple once they're written. Mark doorposts for rations. Count what goes in and what must not come out. Keep voices low enough that worry does not learn new words. The tarred gate planks sweat under your palm. You draw the first cross on the plank that faces the square, a chalk line that says "shut up" in the city's alphabet, and you put your shoulder to the bar to make sure the hinge remembers who is in charge. Far off, the curfew horn gives its narrow note and stops, as if embarrassed to be helpful. A cart rattles from the square and noses its way to your bench, wheels aching the stones. Vinegar-washed bread and onions ride under a rag that keeps out the idea of dust. The carter's boy lifts the cloth and makes the hand sign you learned yesterday. More. You answer with enough, and a tilt of your head toward the stack. He nods. You chalk a short eye on the inside of your slate's rim for stock. You lift the first bowl and set it on the counting plank. 1. You are the key holder and the bowl counter. You are the chalk that knows where to land. The first door on the right has 3 ticks under last night's cross. I. 3 bodies when you shut them. You take the handle of the first bowl in 2 fingers, ladle bread and pottage with the other hand, and knock low on the lintel with your stave so sound travels like courtesy, not command. The panel opens a hand's width and an arm reaches, no voice attached. You tuck the bowl into the grasp and add a slant to the 3rd tick. Issued. A thin hand returns yesterday's bowl and you wipe it with a vinegar rag, then chalk a point beside the tally. Returned. You do not look at faces. That is a rule that isn't written anywhere and keeps streets from breaking. A lamp gutters by the gate. The flame hunkers down and then lifts like a child trying to look taller. You shield the cup with the flat of your hand and breathe gently through your teeth. The flame obeys, maybe because you asked nicely. Your stave taps twice on stone to tell the 2 carriers behind you to move. They pass the cart, shoulders even, and you sign move back to the onlookers whose curiosity always arrives early and tired. Hands rise from doorways, 2 fingers showing enough, the silent grammar everyone learned last week, as if it had been in the language forever. 2 houses in, a woman whispers that her neighbor's lamp has gone out. Her voice was not invited to be here and scolds itself by the time the words reach you. You lift your stave and let the tip touch the hinge of the dark door. Not a knock, a reminder. The panel opens and breath testifies to life. You make a small sign with your thumb near your chin. Later. The woman nods and pulls her own door closed like a promise. A child reaches for a bowl you haven't counted yet. His fingers are quick the way hunger is. You catch the bowl with your sleeve and let it slide into your hand, then put the empty back on the stack and hand him a counted one. You touch 2 fingers to your mouth, and then to your ear, quiet. He copies the shape without embarrassment, the way children treat all new languages like games. You chalk his lintel with a short stroke and add a dot below. The Beatles' book of bowl losses will not need his name tonight. You like how that feels? The steward's runner arrives with a pace meant to be urgent, and a face meant to be trusted. He wheezes a correction and thrusts a folded slip into your free hand. Add 2 at number 7, he says under his breath, as if facts work better when hidden behind lips. You know number 7 holds 3 because you counted them yesterday after someone made a joke about the 3rd. You set the slip on your bench under a vinegar rag. The runner sighs the way people do when their errand meets dignity. You mark number 7 with the same 2 ticks it had last night and add a small chalk dot by the jam where only your fingers will look. That dot means asked for more, not given. You will not let paper lie on behalf of a house that laughs when boys cough. You work left to right and keep to the habit that keeps fear asleep. Chalk the cross on a new door. Count hands and bowls. Wipe returns with vinegar rags. Bread and pottage go down the line like a song that knows all its verses. Watchers' staves tap stone in their own measure. Shut-up boards stare from lintels like polite threats. You keep your voice inside your mouth because rumor eats syllables first and then meals. At the alley's bend, the quicklime bucket waits by a slick patch where water from an upper window forgot to behave. You throw a pinch where feet would fail and the lime hisses as if insulted by your good timing. Your fingers carry the sting of chalk and lime together. You wipe them on your sleeve and call that clean. A lay sister moves through shadow with a basket and leaves a sprig of rosemary on your bench without asking you to notice. Her stash of rosemary and quicklime keeps the place from smelling like fear and more fear. You tuck the sprig under your sleeve and the world grows a little less rude. Two men in the shadows sign more, as if asking were a law. You answer enough and then move back. They obey, miraculously, because a stave looks like more than wood when held by someone who did not sleep by choice. A dog noses your stack and considers stealing industry. You tap your stave on stone and the dog learns to preach self-control to itself. The beadle comes with his book under his arm. He pretends it is a hymnal. He records bowl losses with the calm of a man who assumes people will return what they were given if asked with a frown. He nods at you not because he likes you, but because your ledger lines are straight, and that helps him feel he belongs to a species that can be saved. He shows you a page with 3 names and no chalk points for returned. You chalk an X beside one and hand him the bowl that came with a whisper. Returned. He draws a line through the name with relief he'll deny later. A porter from the hall lingers by the bar with a small bundle of staves. He scratches the back of his neck when you see him and laughs as if a sore needs applause. Under the cooper's shop there is a cellar where extra staves sleep at attention. You keep the memory of that in the forepart of your thoughts because staves walk off the same way clean towels do. You do not intend to beg for sticks. The first round wants to be finished before the church bell turns the hour. You carry the last 2 bowls to doors that have not yet remembered to ask. You chalk I, 2, 3 under a cross that will outlive the day. A curfew horn on the far side of the square tries its voice again, and fails to like it. You set your bench against the gate and draw a small sigil that says no entry after dusk. It is an old sign that mostly frightens children and encourages adults to pretend they learned it in school. A watcher 2 alleys over clicks his stave with yours as he passes the mouth of your lane on his way to the next. Tap, tap, tap. The city has learned to trust that rhythm. A lamp 3 houses down coughs and dies. You make the small sign toward the sky that means later, and the sky makes the bigger one that means I was not invited. You lift the gate latch with a finger and feel the tar tug like a conscience. 1 more count, 1 more chalk, 1 more bowl. The woman 2 houses in has learned the art of whispering with her throat. She tells you the neighbor's lamp has gone out, and now the window is a coin without shine. You mark her lintel with a tiny sign she will not see and lift your stave to rest against the dead door again. The panel moves enough to be counted as obedience. You do not count sighs. You turn away before your face says something unhelpful. Halfway back to the bench, a hand fighting with a window rope drops a bowl onto your shoulder. You take the blow and let the bowl slide into your fingers. The laundry rope strung from window to window creaks like old knees. This is how upper rooms eat now. Bowl hoists and cautious wrists. You hold the bowl up with the back of your hand so the household can see you saw. You pour from your ladle and point to your slate. They nod in air. You chalk their notch and do not write the word patience because patience resents being named. A friar materializes with a chit folded twice around a lie. From the alderman, he mouths, eyes bright with hope you will swallow. The seal is wrong because it tries too hard. You tuck the chit under the beadle's book and press your palm on it until it becomes tomorrow's problem. The friar smiles like a street that did not get what it wanted and moves to the next corner. Child, fingers sticky with the memory of summer fruit that does not exist today, steps out of a doorway and reaches for a bowl from the wrong stack. You catch his wrist gently with your stave and turn the wood so it becomes a rail his hand can ride back to the right place. 2 fingers to your mouth, 2 to your ear, the sign for learn this fast. He nods like boys nod when they are admired for being scolded correctly. You chalk a dot beneath his door tick that will remind you later to add a spoon when he is not watching. A steward, not the runner, stands at the alley's mouth and considers disliking you. He does it politely. He is a man who tells people what words mean. He jerks his chin toward a door 3 down and taps his finger twice on his palm. Add 2. You hold his eyes for exactly as long as courtesy permits and then put your chalk to work on another lintel. You will not let his math rearrange the alley's true numbers. He leaves you a look you will feel tomorrow and walks away to make the morning forget it was night. You work faster because the bell threatens the hour like a parent who has already counted to 2. You slide bowls up the laundry rope and let the creek do the gossip. You swap 3 bowls for 3, wipe the rims with vinegar rags until your fingers smell like pickling and virtue. You chalk the last tally and pull the stave across the mouth of the lane so anyone thinking of pretending the bar doesn't mean you can't will see a stick where they hope to see an invitation. When you set your chalk on the bench, your hand shakes for the first time. Not from fear, from arithmetic that remembered itself in your bones. The bowl stack is shorter by exactly what the slate says it should be. The tally marks under the crosses lean in the same direction. The vinegar rags will need boiling, and there is a lay sister who will do it without reminder because she believes in endings that smell like beginnings. You nod to your own competence, like a man nods at a mule who has learned a gate latch. The gate glows dull in the lamplight. The tar has taken on the sheen that means rain will visit eventually and undo some of your chalk. You must trust that you can write faster than weather can. Behind you, in the dark elbow of the cooper's shop, the step down to the cellar waits for feet that know where it is. If someone tries to sell a stave to a friend, you will feel it before you see it. It is a feeling that grows under your breastbone like a bruise. The alley takes a breath and returns it to you. Someone coughs the way men cough when they do not want to brag about being alive. A watcher's staff taps a code on stone from the next street over, and you translate it as all well with the laziness of a man who knows codes only need to work, not be beautiful. Your slate is chalked, and your bowls are counted, and your voice has not been heard enough to stir anyone with less responsibility. If you would have chalked stronger or softer, if you would have let the runners slip, change number 7, tell me. Drop a comment with dot or add 2, and where you're watching from. I want to hear how your street keeps its fear asleep. You stack the empty bowls where they can watch night without being stolen. You loop the gate chain and set the bar with your shoulder so the iron tells you it remembers your weight. You tuck the rosemary under the bowl book like an oath that does not need witnesses. You chalk the small sigil on the gatepost that says the counting is done, and the hour can have the alley back. The church bell turns the hour like a page. You finish the last stroke at the same moment the tone becomes a line. Your stave taps stone once. The city that taught you this job answers across 3 lanes with the same single note. The sermon in the wood tells everyone who is listening that the bowls went where they should and the chalk landed where it must. The gate accepts the information and pretends it does not care. That is how gates keep peace. You take your hand off the bar and let the night pretend itself normal again. Dawn is a quiet machine if you let it be. Bowls on the bench, ladle measures in the left hand, chalk in the right, the stave leaned where your hip can find it without thinking. Routine settles like dust, without drama, without apology. If you want to see how that routine runs a cordon without waking rumors, stick with me. Tap subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss how a small bench can govern a whole street. Then we work. You set the day's ration sequence the way a cantor sets a psalm, by order, not appetite. White threads tied on bowl handles for bread, blue for broth, yellow for infirm. You knot them with a short, certain pull so the thread lies obedient, and the handle learns to carry its rank without dropping it. On the bench, your ledger waits with the verbs that keep the alley from pretending. Issued for what leaves your hand, returned for what comes home, wiped for what the vinegar rags taught manners, set by for what will serve again without shaming anyone. You write the first line in a hand that won't embarrass you when the beetle peaks, house at eye, bread issued, bowl returned, wiped, set by. At the first door, you chalk a short tick under last night's cross as the bowl passes, just the little tap a mason gives a stone when he knows it's true. The lintel takes the mark without arguing. The panel opens a palm width and a hand takes the weight. The bowl returns empty, and you wipe the rim with the vinegar rag the lay sister boiled before dawn, her rosemary insistence riding the steam as if scent were a weapon worth learning. You notch returned in the margin with the pleasure you never admit aloud. The peal for ration hour pokes the alley's ribs, not a trumpet, just the bell with a habit. Hands appear at slits and windows, laundry ropes creak, as upper rooms lower their bowls by habit and thin hope. You point 2 fingers at the first rope and it tightens, the bowl landing on your bench like a bird that meant to be tamer. Steam from the broth lifts into tallow smoke that the lantern makes into a story for your nose to relearn. You ladle and chalk and ladle, walking your little grammar down the lane with a stave tap to keep the rhythm. By the 5th door, the bench tells on you. The ink bottle teeters and fells itself into your bowl book like a sinner performing zeal. You flip the corner of your sleeve over the blot and hold the page flat, counting aloud inside your mouth so no sound gets out. 1, 2, 3, pressure, then patience. The ink sprawls, but the lines beneath live. You lift the sleeve and breathe. You have 3 names to recopy later. Your hand knows them already, because repetition was waiting for this moment to confess its uses. 2 households swap bowls in the hurry of hunger and embarrassment. You see it before the chalk does, a blue thread in a white hand, a white thread in a blue. You tilt the stave once toward the ground, and the bodies involved learn to be particular. You turn the bowls like coins, and return each to its right owner with the neat wrist turn that says the world is partly solvable. Chalk 2, corrective ticks, and then the tiny dot you invented yesterday for teach again. The dot is the smallest, kindest scolding on this street. At noon the vinegar water goes up the line and scraps come down in a pail, hush traveling with the ladle as if silence weighed the same as broth. You count the returned bowls, tuck the rope ends around handles so upper floors don't drop their gratitude onto your head, and then change the rotapins, carriers to the gate, quicklime to the slick flags near the drain, chalk to the hands that don't shake. You set a boy with a steady gait to the infirm hoist with 4 yellow thread bowls and promise him, with 2 fingers and a nod, that you will watch him walk back. A guild proctor arrives with a face that believes it can count better than you can. He carries a small book blank enough to be threatening. Leaks, he says, not loud, because men like him prefer to weaponize the rumor that they can shout. The clerk from the hall ghosts behind him and whispers the line everyone wears now like a charm that works because it feels old. Moderation, not panic. The proctor wants to step inside the cordon. You measure the crowd with your eyes and see the way heads tilt when someone in fine cloth makes a request. Let him in and the lane will say the gate forgives. Refuse and he will leave with the phrase, hoarders at the gate placed where it will sprout. Either way, the noon cart will not wait on your pride. You walk him along the fence of sight, not step beyond it. Here is where bowls line, you say with open palms and no breath behind them. Here is where chalk lands under crosses. You run your finger under the newest mark and the chalk leaves a dust on your skin that proves nothing, except that you were here when you wrote. You lift a blue thread bowl and set it on the bench, ladle holding its breath, and show him issued with your wrist, and returned with your ear listening for wood on wood. You point to the rope for upper rooms, and let him see the creak and the care. Sick house first, the clerk says aloud, in a voice borrowed from sense, as if replacing the old Saturday warm were his idea and generosity the city's native tongue. The proctor's mouth changes its mind, then remembers his errand and tightens, then remembers the crowd and loosens. He relents without apologizing, which is a kind of success this morning can afford. The cart rumbles at the mouth of the alley, a patient drum with wheels for knees. You are there with your bench, before the animal has decided whether it prefers you. You set your stave across the cart's lip like a minor law and lift the cloth to check the count. Your hand signs more to the carter because his load looks like the same number you disliked yesterday. He points to his tally on a splintered board, and then to the loaf that seems wider than it is because hunger has eyes. You write issued beside each bowl you accept. You do not write returned until your wrist tells you the wood is back in your palm. Before the cart turns to go, you hook the corner of the cloth to show the crowd you looked. The cloth falls back. They learned the lesson without noise. A porter tries to rent extra ladles to 2 households at the elbow where the alley bends. He has learned not to love virtue in public, and now he would like to sell its cousin. You see the exchange because your ledger decided to become a spine and turned your head. Open by order, he says, folding a note with a flourish an alderman's boy must have practiced in a mirror. The seal is a cousin of authority rather than its parent. You take the note, set it under your bowl book, and rest your hand there until it remembers it was never alive. You take the ladles from his fingers and set them in your basin. You give him back one, the one that was always his, and the look men use when they are being told something they already know and didn't want to. He shrugs like a boy, pretending a lesson was his choice. A friar palms you a chit, another, allegedly from the alderman. He has been sent by a street that likes exceptions written in other hands. You show him the sign for later, and then lay the chit under the beetle's pages with the quiet that drains nerve from ink. Some papers deserve fatigue. This one obtains it. By mid-morning, your ledger has absorbed enough truth to keep the afternoon from lying. Chalk ticks live under crosses like stitches that mean more than the seam ever will. Broth steam carries the rosemary you tucked into the pot to keep hands sweet around the rim. Tallow smoke does that thing where it makes the air belong to the day instead of the rumor. The proctor circles once more and looks into your face for fear. He does not find it, which confuses him. He was promised the power to harvest fear by the man who sent him. He pockets his blank book and leaves to invent a narrative friendlier to blank pages. A watcher from the next street over slides his lamp around your corner, and the light crawls by your bench like a cat unsure about ownership. You are reassigning bowls in the dark because two households swapped again. By mistake or hunger's cunning, it doesn't matter. You read threads by touch, blue inside white, white inside blue, and unknot them with your thumb and your thought. The lamp climbs the stone. You finish before light can claim the victory. You tip your stave once against the ground, the sound that means the day belongs to your bench again. The lamp withdraws, chastened or relieved. The beetle's shadow falls across your ledger at the exact wrong line. You are writing set by for a bowl that carries a crack you will lie about until dusk, because you do not have a spare, and the upper floor will need it more than your conscience. He coughs at the place where bowl losses should be more numerous, then counts your ticks, nods once, and pretends he didn't see your accommodation. This is how peace gets bought, in tiny perjuries exchanged under tarred planks, everyone clean enough to keep their job. A boy's hands sag under a rope that hoists two bowls at once. You wedge your stave under the rope and make the wood a lever so his shoulders can borrow the ground. Enough, you sign, and he reduces his ambition to a weight he owns. He will be a good carrier if he survives being generous. You write sick house first at the bottom of your slate because the warden said it in a voice like stone, and because you want to remind your wrists when they get tired of telling the same truth. You pin 3 yellow threads on the bench beside it, as if color were an argument that cannot be refuted. Your hand burns once where the thread dragged over an old cut. You keep moving until it forgets how to talk. At dusk, the second count arrives like weather. You change your ledger verb back to issued, and your ear learns to tell the difference between gratitude and habit by the speed of wood on wood. Chalk ticks lean toward the night as if they know where dawn happens. A man with tired knees tries to learn the hand sign for move back and laughs at himself when his fingers get the grammar wrong. You laugh into your shoulder so he can like himself longer than the joke expects. You finish the line and set the long hush where the alley can trip over it and be grateful. That is when the guild proctor returns with a leak he cannot define and asks again to step inside. You stand where your stave could be a threshold and say what you've been saying all day without syllables, threshold only. He takes a breath big enough to frighten people and finds himself obeying your stilled palm. The clerk from the hall murmurs moderation a second time without moving his lips. You tilt your head toward the sick house rope and make the sign for eyes there instead. The proctor looks, sees a bowl rise and fall without drama, sees yellow thread that means the sick eat before he does, and leaves with nothing to preach but something he can live with. You have kept fear asleep. Routine ends as quietly as it began. You tally the returned bowls, wipe the last rims with a rag that once smelled like vinegar and now smells like the day. You chalk the final tick under the last cross and add the dot for teach again at one door where a child learned the difference between a stack and a stack. You knot your colored threads into tomorrow's order and lay the ledger where the beetle can find it and claim he had a hand in its handwriting. Corruption remains what it always was, someone's idea of cleverness with a new hat. The porter keeps his single extra ladle, honestly rented to no one, under the bench where you can see it and he can practice liking virtue. A second, secret slate, 3 houses who never queue for bowls, sleeps behind the bowl book like a sin that insists it is stewardship. You slide it out, erase 1 name, leave 2 because they are both old, and shame travels poorly upstairs. You slide it back and write teach again on your wrist, rubbing the chalk away with your thumb until it leaves a ghost. If you were standing here when the proctor asked to inspect leaks, would you have let him step past the threshold to quiet rumors, or kept him outside to protect the choreography? Drop threshold only or inside inspection in the comments, and where you're watching from. I read them after the last vinegar rag goes into the pail. The peel for the evening round never raises its voice. It doesn't have to. The alley already knows. Bowls in, bowls out, chalk short ticks, not crosses this time. Account of what came home, not what left. You bar the gate with your shoulder, feel the plank answer that it remembers you, and let the long hush take its seat. The dust settles. Routine does its good work. You learn again that the street prefers verbs to nouns when it's hungry. Issued, returned, wiped, set by. And the small private ones you never write where anyone can see, spared, taught, forgiven. Frost tightens the taps and the wall tells you before the pipe does. The stone has that ache again, the one you feel in your palm as soon as you lean in to listen. The yard standpipe gives not its usual small hiss of confidence but a sulky drip, then a pause you do not forgive. You wedge the gate with your knee, slide the spare bucket under what little the morning will permit, and reach for the lead patch kit with the other hand. If you want to see how a street passes its test without waking fear, stay close when the rumor starts to breathe. We answer it with bowls, chalk, and deliberate quiet. At the outer bar, a market man has found his audience. The shut-ups eat better than we do, he declares, voice carrying like onions in hot fat. A murmur runs the fence like a match looking for tinder. The warden steps into the sound and places a flat palm on the bar. Warden's piece at the cordon, he says without raising his voice, and the phrase fits itself around the timber like iron. Then to you, a short chain of orders in the grammar all of you share, demonstration without spectacle, bowls counted in the open, infirm rations warmed first, chalk fresh at the gate. The sacrist arrives behind him and adds the footnote only he can get away with. No clatter by the night stairs. You nod. That is the extra rule that keeps sleep from unthreading what the day just sowed. You fetch wax and lead for the yard pipe and flip the lid of the kit with your thumb. The mason slides onto the bench with the expression of a man who loves a crack because it gives him something to shame. He warms the thin square of lead against his wrist, kneads the beeswax until it gives in, then pats the seam where the frost has taught the curve a bad habit. Sureties, he mutters. Some men keep law in their pockets and let it fall out when they work. You press the warm patch home while he dresses the edge with his dull knife. The drip confesses, then reforms into a thin, obedient thread. The spare bucket will not be insulted to wait. You leave it in the shadow where drips are allowed to be themselves. You set your bench where the lane can see it and forget it at the same time. Set quicklime by the slick flags, set vinegar rags where habit can reach them without thinking. The chalk on the gate gets a new cross, a fresh white that says closed in a voice no town ever taught in school, and under it you write the small dot you invented on the first night, counted here. The bowls stack on your plank like tame ideas. The cellarer arrives just long enough to hiss move when the crowd starts to ooze forward because the sight of a ladle makes appetite forget its posture. You make your first choice before the bell has found the shape of its sound. Which line fills first? The upper window hoists cleaner, faster, safer, or the sick house door, needier, slower, breath that stains the air with labor. You tell your wrist before you tell your head. Yellow threads for the infirm row go on top of the white and blue. The wise woman is watching from the cross corner with a shawl that has seen men remember their age in one afternoon. She will remember if you do not. You tuck the brazier behind your bench where the cordon hides it from wandering eyes and light it with the ember you did not admit you carried. If a passerby sees flame, he will shout luxury. If he sees steam rising from a bowl, he will call it rule. You cradle the first hot bowl under a damp cloth, and walk the short aisle that has learned to be a procession only when the cordon requires it. Sick house first, the clerk from the hall says, not loud, with the air of a man quoting a maxim he wants to belong to, and you let him think it was his sentence. You pass the yellow-bowled warmth through the narrow doorway and feel it leave your fingers the way waking leaves a face. You chalk a tick on the sick house lintel and add the dot you always add there to remind yourself never to ask them for speed. The ration bell is kinder than rumor. It raises its neck and places a sound in the air as if it were hanging a coat. The murmur at the outer bar begins to collect itself for the next wrong idea, but a herald's trumpet cuts it into manageable pieces and then puts them down where even a market man can ignore them. The warden's palm is still on the bar. His eyes say they can stay there all day. You nod without letting your chin move. Upper windows lower their rattling arms. Laundry ropes pay out their bowls with the sound old men make when getting down onto a floor they hope will let them up again. You nod at the first rope, and the bowl lands on your plank where it can meet the ladle without arguments. Blue thread. Bread and broth together. Enough. You chalk a small tick under the cross on that lintel. A child's hand appears next to the lowered bowl as if it were a duckling following its mother. You tap your stave on the stone once, and the hand thinks better of learning prematurely. A passerby gets his first look at the brazier, because the wind is a snitch, and draws breath for the word that will make your morning ache. You don't give him the breath back. You lift a vinegar rag and wipe the rim of the next bowl with a leisure that teaches even from a distance. Rule, not luxury, your wrist says, then pours. The man closes his mouth. He has a life to return to. You are not it. The apothecary drifts along the fence and selects an audience not clever enough to charge him. Lie cleans the soul as well as sleeves, he announces, the kind of sentence a man invents when he loves a product and needs a theology. A priest nearby, either by luck or the sacrist's design, clears his throat and points to a lintel where someone has chalked a private charm. No talismans, he scolds the door, not the people. Mark for rations, not for magic. You note device, not charm, in your little book, and put a line through the chalk on the lintel with the same gentleness you reserve for lifting a sty from an eyelid with warm water. The mason finishes his triage with a pat and a nod at the standpipe, like a man praising a dog who has remembered not to jump. The thread of water respects the form again. You set the spare bucket under it and instruct the boy who will watch the bucket how to tell whether one gulp is generous or mean. Count to 7, you sign. If the lip isn't wet again by then, wave your hand. Not both. Your shoulder knows what to do. The cellarer's hiss finds you a second time in the space of a sigh. Move. It isn't about you. It's about a boy sagging at the gate under a pail of scraps, shoulders answering gravity more respect than it deserves. You are there with your stave in time to make wood into a rail and palm into a shelf. The boy's hands remember work, and his knees remember ownership. He grins in that way boys do when they have been saved in time to call it their own talent. You lift the pail's lip and give him most of its weight like a joke he will not tire of telling. The market man tries his story again. The shut-ups eat better than we do. He offers it to the fence as if it were bread. The fence prefers nails. You answer him with a stack. You raise a finger width above the plank and let the crowd count from where they stand. Issued, your ledger says. The bowls return one by one and fall into the second stack, vinegar wiping their rims into a row of humble shine. Returned, your ledger says. You tilt the plank so anyone with eyes can do their own arithmetic. Adjectives go down hard against numbers they watched grow. The wise woman offers you a rosemary sprig, the way you might hand someone a verb when his sentence is too short. To keep hands sweet, she says, without letting anyone else hear what sweetness costs. You pinch a leaf into the broth pot, and the street stops imagining it can smell fear. When you lift the next hot bowl under its cloth, the steam has learned to pretend it is the idea of order. The sacrist moves along the cordon with his palm on the stone near the night stairs, shepherding sound back into its harness. No clatter, his hand says, and even the ladle minds its manners. You lay out quicklime near the slick flagstones, and a fresh hiss writes a small word no one needs to read aloud. You will sweep it later, with the same attention you bring to the place where the chalk line on the gate wants to become weather. Between gate and standpipe and infirm row, you sprint a road you could walk in your sleep, and sometimes do. The brazier stays hidden, the bowls stay warm, the chalk stays honest. When a woman raises 2 fingers for more, you answer with the palm that means enough, and the chin that means you first if you mean the sick house. She understands your grammar. You understand her hope. A herald's trumpet from the square cuts a second attempt at a murmur and slaps its pieces into pockets the men can carry home. The trumpet doesn't know you but keeps being helpful. The warden looks like a man who could spend his life with his palm on a bar and consider it a mathematical career. Behind him, the clerk from the hall folds your word into his own and tries it on like a cloak, moderation. He will say it later in a room with better floors and believe he invented it. That is fine. The word likes as many fathers as it can get. By the time the ration bell gives its second coat of sound to the morning, the crack at the standpipe has stopped believing in itself. The spare bucket has a job it can explain to its grandchildren, and the first line has learned to thread itself around the sick house door without treating the detour like tragedy. You have stepped behind the brazier 3 times to relight virtue, and 3 times to put it back where only rules can see it. Someone tries to call out luxury and finds he does not like the taste. The rosemary and the chalk have made other flavors available. You measure out a ladle for the upper window, where the boy with the too proud rope stands ready to drop his bowl on your head. You raise your stave so the handle becomes a hoop he can land through, and he lowers the bowl with the seriousness of a man covering a king. You pour, he hauls, you chalk, he nods. The rope sings its small linen song on the pulley. The alley, without agreeing, agrees to be a choir. The apothecary tries again to sell lie as confession. Cleans the soul, he mutters, working the crowd like a rag against rims. The priest looks at him and thinks about arguing, and then looks at you and decides he prefers a day with fewer nouns. He thumps a lintel where a chalk charm has begun to look like theology and says, "Rations, not relics," in a voice that everyone could survive being told to obey. The test ends without applause. That is how it works when you pass by moving and not by speaking. The bowls in the issued stack are fewer than the bowls in the returned stack by exactly the number the sick house will send back when it remembers to breathe. The tick marks under crosses have lengthened without revealing secrets. The quicklime has melted its hiss into history. The warden takes his hand off the bar without anyone noticing, and the rumor loses its appetite. If you were here with me, if Frost tightened the taps and a market man lined up his myth, would you have filled upper window hoists first, cleaner, faster, or the sick house door needier, slower? Drop windows or sick house and where you're watching from. I read those when the brazier is cold again. You mark the last lintel with the short tick that means saw and the tiny dot that means we'll check again. You return the lead kit to the bench with the dignity of a man who has no interest in celebrating a patch that did its job. You set the spare bucket where a child won't think it's a toy. You chalk the small dot on the gate that tells tomorrow where today began. The alley breathes once, deep, the way people do when they have watched a trick that insists it is not a trick. The sacrist slides his palm off the stone at the night stairs, and the stair keeps the secret by itself. The warden looks down the fence and sees nothing to carry into his afternoon. The market man has found a new lie to water. You pick up your stave and your chalk and your ledger, and you pass your fingers under the rosemary's soft indignation. The street smells like work that chose to be quiet. The gate remembers your shoulder. The bowl stack sits like a confession you did not have to hear. Frost returns to its occupation of being beautiful and less than useful. The pipe hums a thin hymn you will forget on purpose so you can be surprised by gratitude at dusk. The test is over. The cordon holds. The rumor goes thin. Your bench becomes a little ordinary again, which is the only victory you trust. Torches gutter and the gate bars with that elbow-deep clunk that tells a street it has reached the end of its say. Word has walked past the court and found a crowd that likes easy choruses, Monkley bowls, favored doors. The jeer spends itself like cheap coin and still buys attention. Inside, the hall is a box of candles arguing with wax. If you want the unvarnished way a sentence on paper can keep a crowd from teaching itself fire, stay with me. We will copy fair, fast, flawless, then put out whatever tries to bloom in the dark. The warden sits with his palm on a plank, as if numbers can be kept with skin. The clerk from the hall smooths a notice with 2 fingers, the gesture men make when they plan to wear the sentence later, like a badge. The beadle leans his stick and pushes the draft under your hand. Copy fair, copy fast, copy flawless. Quiet passage to and from the cordon. Fines for bowl losses, written as alms because the cellarer likes the way that word sits on a tongue. Infirm ration affirmed in plain script, so nobody can pretend they misread it. On paper, orders to air the shut-ups. On paper, if not in lungs, you think, and then tell your hand to behave. The bench smells like rosemary and vinegar, because the infirm row has been steaming kindness since none. You square the sheet and write in a hand the beadle's book will not be ashamed to stand next to. Quiet passage, you put down, each letter anchoring itself to the line. Bowl immersements to be tallied and bound, recognizances with awkward crosses to be taken at the bar, bowls to be recovered or paid for in coin that knows the way to the alms dish. Infirm ration to take precedence, airing of shut-ups to occur by hour and not by panic. You leave the escape hatches the warden prefers, save illness, save collapse, save order under strain. Your sandpot tips, a little hiss inside the hall, and the grit lifts wet from ink into a mat you trust. Before the beadle can cough, you hear it. A flare at the back sheds blooms. Orange takes the laundry wood like it was promised an audience. You do not look at anyone. You are already halfway there with 2 boys, the buckets finding your hands without thinking. Wet wool hisses on embered planks, and the sound steals breath from the jeer outside for one long second. The line beyond the gate holds itself, because even a crowd respects a flame when it is not their turn to make it. Back at the plank, your hands remember their other job. The beadle points to a blank in the margin and slides a small slip under your thumb. Keep this quiet, the hand is tired and the wax careless. You lay the slip under the bowl book and rest your palm on it until paper forgets what it wanted to be. Omit it forever, your bone says to your nerve, and your nerve sits down. A coin rings on the plank and fails to shine. The dead carrier's sister sets her only piece on your bench like a tooth she cannot afford to lose. 5 words different, she says, when breath comes back from the fire. Save the infirm from cold broth. She does not beg, she recruits. You put your pen over the line where exceptions can live without starting a stampede, and write the smallest permission that solves the largest problem. Infirm ration may be warmed outside schedule on warden's order. The beadle's cough finds you at the worst syllable. You do not scratch it out. Under the guest loft, a trap opens with the grace of a yawn. Men with coin go down and come up with less of it and the same smiles. Extra bowls, someone says with the cheerfulness that belongs to men who have never had to bury a sister with shoulders like broom handles. The porter posted, "There is a new type of clever. You mark the place with a thought and file the thought where tomorrow can turn it into a sentence with nails." The warden's stick tests the floor near the door and finds the drum roll under a posted notice. He nods to you. You carry the fresh paper and the hammer to the gate, where key rings stack like teeth on the bailiff's belt. Cartwheels squeal by the bar, and the sound makes you write smaller, as if cramped letters cause less friction. You nail the notice where the town can read and pretend it wrote it. Quiet passage to and from the cordon, no gawking, no paid bowls, bowl losses to be swum back upstream in coin or wood. Infirm ration affirmed, the airing of shut-ups as posted. The outer bar leans toward riot the way grass leans toward a ditch when wind has had practice. You feel your name find a stone in the hall where the clerk keeps to be silenced fresh. You are one margin away from it. You remember the steward's mouth from last week and regret nothing about the stare you did not return. The beadle coughs because the hour expects it. The astrologer wanders in to declare the lucky hour present if men will stop talking and then shoves it forward with his thumb when clouds decide they prefer trouble. No one pays him. He doesn't take it personally. Inside, the paper grows its second spine. Tallies of bowl immersements are bound with twine that speaks an old language about debts and decency. Recognizances are taken with crosses so shy they look like blushes. The keyrings on the table clack with the appetite of crows learning the word cash. Rosemary and vinegar steam persists under everything like a small choir. Your pen reaches the line about airing and writes it twice, once for the poster and once for the book the warden's children will discover. When they clean his cell and want to know who he was, besides a man who liked order. The porter with extra ladles appears at your elbow and lifts 2 fingers as if a private sign can turn a public notice into an exception. You take the ladles, Leave him his own and set the rest in the basin with a noise that knows the sacrist likes silence. He shrugs and saunters toward the trap under the guest loft to practice learning nothing. A patron's runner brings you a folded chit and a smile he purchased earlier in a mirror. Opened by order, he says, thumb on wax. The seal has all the right shapes and none of the right fatigue. You tuck it under your ledger and make the dot you always make on your wrist when you have decided to owe the patron nothing for a while. You will not let one household's noon turn your cordon into gossip. The crowd outside tries a fresh lyric, favored doors. Someone coins the phrase and it rubs well enough to pass through 10 mouths without losing polish. The clerk from the hall whispers moderation like a man petting a dog who might be useful if he stops barking. You split your attention between wood and paper. Unlock or relock, erase or obey. You take the infirm list from the peg and study the names, like faces. One contested one sits there, placed by the steward's cousin's cousin with a note that claims weak chest and means full purse. You drop the name onto the bench where the rosemary has left a tacky ghost and watch it not glue. You set it aside. It will not be in the morning's warm. The sister of the dead carrier touches your wrist because she is allowed to, and your skin answers because it wants to. He'll stay dead, she says like a savage kindness, and you add her household to the infirm list because that is not what she asked, but it is what she needs. You write it small and straight. You are teaching the street to recognize your handwriting, and that is how mercy gets both its bad reputation and its enduring power. Outside, the drum roll under the posted notice proves it can hold a crowd long enough to try the trick of learning. You read the board aloud in order, voice flat and patient, and the jeers die in thirds. The cartwheel at the bar squeals again, and the squeal turns into a laugh that does not belong to anyone. It is just the sound men make when they realize they brought the wrong weapon to a policy fight. The Beatles' cough finds you again as your pen crosses the line about fines. You feel the cough on your shoulder and keep the line straight. The astrologer pronounces the hour unfavorable to uproar if rain happens. The sacrist slides a palm along the stone by the night stairs until the stone says it can be trusted to mind its own. The warden signs the notice as if his letter had been there first. He has learned to live without needing to be the pen that writes him. You admire entire religions less. Beneath the guest stare, the cellaret breathes in gold and out apology. You catch the porter at the hinge and look long enough to make him decide he would prefer to sing his excuse later. You flip the hatch with your stave and count the bowls. 2 more than we issued, 2 less than we set by. The cellarer finds your shoulder and places a finger on the page you will write in the morning. Not today. Today we survive by being obvious. You close the hatch. The trap discovers it has not hidden after all and goes still like a child. By the second hour, the notice has become furniture. Men lean against it to discover whether their backs can learn policy by osmosis. Women pass it without needing it. Children trace letters with fingertips because it is new, and new is rare. You check the infirm list one more time. The contested name tries to look sick. You lift your pen, then put it down. Obey where obedience is not cowardice. Omit where omission is courage. You keep him off and write teach again on your wrist because you felt mean in the doing. A boy runs the rope for the upper windows, like a man who thinks rope is announcement. You catch the bowl as gently as his pride will allow. You pour and wipe and chalk and nod. The alley's long hush sits where men can trip on it and be grateful. The rosemary gives up its steam and resigns itself to being memory. You touch the gate bar and it says you are allowed to lean. You do so exactly once. If you were me, if a sister's coin asked you for 5 words different, if a patron's slip told you to keep this quiet, would you omit or obey? Write omit or obey in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I read them while the last vinegar rag steams and the bowl book dries flat. At the bar, key rings stack like teeth and make a music that isn't trying to be nice. The warden lets his palm leave the plank and the world does not break. The cart's squeal changes to a purr because someone listened to it. The guild proctor stands at the edge of the notice and finds that he has nothing useful to add. The beadle closes his stick and puts the tip to the floor in a way that means the hour can go back to pretending. You lay the ledger in its place and cover it with the cloth that smells like broth and rosemary. The torch gutters one more time the way torches do when knights think they matter more than ink. You bar the gate and let the wood feel your weight. The price of warm broth has been counted in chalk and coin in a sister's palm. The cordon holds. The rumor will have to find a cheaper day. Dawn unbuttons the sky, one pale stitch at a time. Trumpets try their lips. Drums find a steady heart and lend it to the square. The velvet voice climbs its little crate by the bar and unfurls the proclamation like a clean sheet over a stubborn bed. His Grace commends those who kept quiet order by the cordon and ration bench. The sentence travels the fence, finds the lintels, and sits there like it was always supposed to be written on wood. Bowls gleam where you stacked them. Windows stand open because a bargain in ink said they must. The brazier glows low only because the rule allowed it, and because last night your hand kept faith with moderation. You are the first shadow to move. Key at your belt, cord on your shoulder, ledger under your arm, the quiet wrapped round your throat like a scarf. You have slept 4 hours, and remember all of them. If you like endings that add rather than undo, stay with me. We will carry paper where it needs to go. Touch the chalk one last time, and leave the gate better than we found it. The market man with the myth, yesterday's loudness dressed as today's swagger, passes the outer bar free as air. He has traded the shut-ups eat better than we do for the cordon runs like a psalm, as if he wrote both. A midwife's lintel just outside the ward wears a yellow tag instead of red, a small knot whose courage you can feel in your wrist if you press there. A widow folds to the cobbles near the Coopers. 2 strangers shape a chair of their hands and lift her without asking who she belongs to. The velvet voice does the rest of the page, and the people accept being commended because it costs them nothing today. Your job costs. You are final witness and courier of consequences. You carry duplicates like hot loaves. One to the warden, quiet passage, fines for bowl losses, infirm ration affirmed, airing by hour, signatures where signatures matter. He reads without moving his mouth, signs without moving his pride, and gives you only a look that is more useful than gratitude. I saw, one to the infirm row, the copy with the exception you smuggled into the margin, the 5 words the dead carrier's sister bought last night with her coin and a future she refuses to complain about. Save the infirm from cold broth. The infirmarian tucks the paper under the shelf where the rosemary oil and vinegar sit like polite conspirators. She nods once. She does not smile. She has more stitches to count than smiles to spend. 1 to the guild, because men who love tallies want their notices stamped and hung where they can point and claim ancestry later. The clerk ties your page to a peg with string that will break by none. You know this, and you will bring a tougher string after breakfast. Chests of fines grown into carts as if money is tired of being counted. Key rings stacked like teeth on the bailiff's belt chatter along as he walks, metal gossip. By the bar, the public reading ends and the velvet voice folds itself into the day like a napkin after a meal. A bailiff hammers your notice a little flatter for joy. Vinegar coins clink in ladles at the alms dish and sound like a hymn for people who prefer the key of work. A parchment gets marked misadventure at the warden's plank for a slip on wet flags. A man who never learned where to put his feet on rainy mornings is saved from scandal by a word that cleans as it lies. The last rosemary bundle smolders to ash by the brazier because even kindness needs to stop pretending to be fire. You pin the day's infirm roster over the bowl pegs in the shed. Yellow threads in a small, obedient row, blue for next, white for steady. Men read it the way they read weather. They move their plans around it without needing to announce they have done so. You chalk the dot next to 2 names that require watching, not because they are thieves, but because habit learns to widen its mouth when someone else will pay for what spills out. Then the choices arrive like clocks. Under the bench, the secret slate of spared bowls you kept for nights when hope would be more dangerous if it were loud. Behind your book, the side list of doors you aired against orders in that week when the wind was miserly and you watched breaths go shallow for want of anything more than sense. Leak, burn, or file. You run your thumb along the slate's edge and count what kind of person you have been in this job. Leak would be honest and glorious and use you for kindling. It would land in the square like an argument that feels true because it's finally allowed to stand on its legs. The steward's cousin would discover an urgent commitment to procedure. The patron's runner would find a pen, and decide to learn its purpose. Your name would join other names on a tally labeled to be silenced, the stone for it already warmed. Burn would be quick and cowardly and have mercy on no one. It would protect the warden from the page he signed, the guild from the rule they prefer to nail than obey, the steward from his own reflection. It would return the slate to its old function, being wood. It would also tell you, in your sleep, what it thinks you have become, and it would not lie. File is the story this city most often survives by, the drawer that opens for questions and not for rumors, the key that says later to everyone but the right hand, the paper that will be found when someone with authority and a conscience asks you for proof in the tone that suggests he is ready to change because he has noticed a cost he didn't know he was collecting. You slide both slate and list under the ledger where the Beatles book lives and the warden's signatures nap. You push the drawer until the click becomes a promise. File, you write in your spine, and your spine nods. The steward appears as predicted, enamel badge open on his palm like a coin that needs your chest to become legal. Mark more wisely, he says, the way a man orders wine he thinks will travel. His smile has lint on it. His eyes already own your bench without considering whether the bench wants to be owned. He makes livery sound like a blanket. You look at the cord on your shoulder, the brazier's rim under your fingers, the key that presses its small, necessary bruise at your hip. Later, you say with a tilt of your head and a hand that means threshold only. His mouth considers you like a gate worth learning to pick. He closes the badge with a sound too sharp for morning and goes to find a crowd that likes story better than system. The guildmaster offers no trinkets. He does not insist that his paper smells like smoke. He stands with one foot on a stone the city trusts and says what people say when they prefer to save a life without the romance of a fight. Sanctuary, if needed, till the pest passes. He means your name when he says needed. He means a pallet under a chapel eve and bread someone else counted. He means a season of looking like a man between rooms. You nod with the respect that belongs to men who are useful and generous and know how to fold a kindness until it fits in a pocket. I'll stand here, you answer without syllables, and he reads your weight correctly. The warden's look moves past you on its way to the next paper, but it falls on you long enough to rest, I saw. He says nothing because that is the premium he pays for having learned whom he should be grateful to. He puts his palm back on his plank for ritual, not because he doubts the plank without him. You allow him the gesture because there is tenderness in letting men keep their habits when they've chosen them well. The street fills its routines, as if nothing extraordinary has been happening in the lanes these past nights, which is exactly how you measure victory. The upper windows, lower bowls, white, blue, yellow, each thread behaving without reminding you it expects praise. Laundry ropes, rehearsed as if for music, creak like old song. Hands appear at slits and drop coins at the alms dish. Children learn to press 2 fingers to their mouths for quiet and 2 to their ears for listen, and laugh with the dignity you prefer on them. People read your notice and keep walking, which is better than any ovation. A bowl drops from a pulley and the man above writes his apology into the air with both hands. Your stave turns into a rail. The bowl finds you, and the man learns to be better by supper. You make your last deliveries. The infirm copy hangs where the rosemary used to sit. Something else smokes there now, a frankness that answers sickness without asking what name it wants to be called. The guild copy anchors the corner of the board you meant it to anchor. The warden's duplicate grows authoritative in his pile until it looks like it will be blamed for the correct thing. The proclamation by the bar gets a finger-smudged edge where men have traced words before trusting them. Once you would have wanted the smudge wiped. Today you prefer its evidence. There are small dramas because the world believes in them. A parchment at the plank marks misadventure for a man who slipped on a wet flag and invented a new swear. He is alive and uses the swear only on himself. Chests of fines grown into carts. A boy counts towel tokens in the wrong story and changes to bowl pegs without shame when you tap the stave to the new grammar. A last rosemary bundle completes its service to the morning and descends to ash. You stir the ash with your stave and let it lie where quicklime will cover it later. You forgive it for wanting to be more dramatic than it was allowed to be. Then the thing you didn't plan for, a decision presenting itself with no warning, like a guest who knows which door never locks. A patron's runner returns with a new chit that has learned nothing from last night's patience. "Open by order," he says, thumb already on wax. Behind him, the steward looks like a man who brought a weather system. The guildmaster breathes the way a man breathes when he knows he will offer a sanctuary again he hopes you will decline again. The warden reads a name on a roster and decides to practice his signature by not needing it here. You are the hinge. Your job is not to be right. Your job is to be usable. You set the chit under your palm and let your hand decide. It decides the way good hands do when work has taught them a preference for what keeps rather than what pleases. Omit, the hand says. You slide the paper into the part of the drawer for things that fell short of needing fire. You chalk a dot on your wrist to remind yourself you owe someone an explanation and a lesson. You add a thread to the infirm roster and remove another. You have learned to do both motions in one breath. The market man passes the bar again with a new opinion to lend the city. You hear him try lanes that move in his mouth. It sounds better when the people who made the lanes say it, but you will take allies where you find them. A midwife passes your bench and touches it with 2 fingers like a priest touches wood that has learned to host holiness. You show her the sign for enough and she shows you the one for later, a pact you prefer to any contract. And then you understand what all the chalk and bowls truly bought. Not glamour, obedience, not luxury. Lanes that move, stomachs fed, wounds tended, not piety. Practice. A harvest of men promised for later, because a king has an idea for how to spend bodies, yes, but also a harvest of women who will not have to trade their patience for bread at midnight because your bench exists in daylight and can be pointed to. A city that learned to prefer verbs over adjectives when it was afraid. Issued, returned, wiped, set by, filed. You add 2 quiet ones you never wrote anywhere the beetle could copy, spared, taught. Your kit remembers you as you put it down. Keys, cord, brazier, silence. The keys know your pocket by shape and move inside to be comfortable. The cord coils not like a snake but like a piece of rope that believes in loops, because loops are how the world comes back to itself. The brazier cools into iron again. Your silence frees your tongue for the word you need to ask those who have listened this far. If it had been your bench and your drawer and your slate, if the badge had shone, if the sanctuary had called softly, if the warden had looked without saying your name, would you have leaked, burned, or filed? Leak, burn, or file? Write it in the comments and where you're watching from. I count those after last light, when ink behaves and the bar remembers my shoulder. The public reading finishes for the 3rd time near the bar. The velvet voice always believes in 3s, and the crowd migrates toward its work, like water finding fields. The notice flaps once as if learning how to be a flag, then realizes it is a page and resumes its best shape. You set your palm on it for a second, feel the roughness come through, and thank paper for being better at politics than it knows. The gate smells like tar and weather in your hand. It remembers your weight. It has learned with you that justice here is airflow and bowl budget, mercy is policy and not indulgence, survival is a choreography of chalk, tokens and staves performed by people no one should need to applaud. You step back from the bar and let the lane swing on the hinge you have become. Someone will remember your fingers at the chalk. The steward will remember them suspiciously. The guildmaster will remember them with a nod. The warden will remember them with that look that says, "I saw." The street will forget them on purpose so it can live as if this all happened naturally. That is fine. You prefer it. You walk away from your bench without turning to admire it. The bowls are already gleaming for someone else. The Rosemary's Ash is already teaching quicklime about quiet kitchens. The rope at the upper window has learned to creak at the right tempo. The cordon holds. The roomer looks for cheaper lodgings. You carry the ledger home under your arm and file the slate where questions, real ones, late ones, will find it. You put the cord in the basket where tomorrow keeps its tools. You stand at your door and rub the tar from your palm with vinegar and let your hand smell like policy again. And when the bell turns the hour like a page, you are ready to start reading it from the top, because this is how a city teaches itself to speak softly while it does loud work. Quiet justice at the gate. Bowls in, bowls out. Chalk short tick. Move back.